Good morning, everyone. Hello again. I'm Stu Ellis from the WCIA 3 Farm Department, and we have a special program for you today. We'll start out with a question. What in agriculture is a certainty? What is certain in agriculture? Well, we've got a good crop coming on, but there's some folks that have some pollination problems. And there's some folks that have southern rust and tar spot. And we don't really know what the yields would be for certain. What are the prices going to be? Well, they were high and not anymore. They're not certain. What about government policy? Well, there are a lot of changes. A lot of changes in the Farm Bill, a lot of changes in biofuels, a lot of changes in exports. Nothing is certain there. So, what is certain in agriculture? Well, the only thing that's really certain is uncertainty. So, that's what we're going to talk about today. A lot of uncertainty in agriculture and what you can take home from it. We've got four individuals that I visited with in the past few days about a lot of issues in agriculture. Corn prices, corn demand, bean prices, soybean demand, biofuels, and even someone that gets into the area that we don't have a lot of issues around here, but still have a great impact on agriculture, and that's when we get to labor. I was labor on the farm when I was growing up. My dad knew that I was going to be available in the field, but are we certain about what's going to happen when we need some labor? So those are some of the issues that we're going to be addressing today. We're going to start with Scott Geralt. Scott is chief economist for the American Soybean Association. And we talked to him about soybean prices, about biofuels, exports, government policy, and I think he's got a lot of things that you'll be wanting to hear in this conversation. Corn prices have been going up, soybean prices have been going down. What's happening here?
Yeah, it's been a very complex market for sure. We have a large South American crop that's hitting the world, or has been hitting the world, and then we have a decent looking crop. Crop conditions are looking really good, which is pulling down prices. And then there's a lot of trade uncertainty out there yet. I don't think that one has fully hit the market, and it's not fully reflected in the prices. But that is out there hanging over everything as well. So we're seeing tough financial times for farmers. Unfortunately, input costs have not followed those crop prices down, the soybean prices, and so farmers are experiencing a lot of stress. So we're hoping things turn around, especially if we can get some trade agreements, help bring prices up and provide good outlets for the production. But yeah, it's been a tough market, a very volatile market.
There's been some good domestic demand, and thanks to soybean oil, it seems like there's going to be a bigger demand for soybean oil. Is that going to be reflected in the market very soon?
Yeah, the increased demand for soybean oil is already starting to be reflected in the market. I don't know that it's fully there yet. We're still waiting on a final rule from the EPA about biofuel blending. They gave us a very good proposal, which did help pump up markets. But I think if they adopt this rule this proposal as it's written in late October, that will bump up markets even more because there'll be certainty at that point. But really, we've seen the growth in soybean demand, U.S. soybean demand from biofuels. Really, we haven't been growing as much in trade. It's been the domestic demand.
Now, what is that EPA rule all about? Where's the impact of that? What's it going? It's going to demand oil as opposed to meal.
Correct. So Congress passed the Renewable Fuel Standard back in the 2000s, and it determines the amount of biofuel blending in the fuel supply, and EPA gets to set that every year. And so there's been some issues with them setting on time and how far they set it, but they are setting the blending levels for 2026 and 2027 right now. And so that is the rule, that we're talking about, because once we know that, we know how much biofuel we'll need, which translates back to the demand for soybean oil and those biofuels than the demand for soybeans. So yeah, so the soybean meal isn't directly taken into those programs, but you get 4 pounds of soybean meal for every pound of soybean oil. So as we produce soybean oil for the biofuels to meet those requirements, the EPA gives the petroleum blenders, that will also produce more soybean meal.
Now, as we look at what the projections are for soybean oil, there's going to be more oil demanded than what we're going to be producing right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of growth in demand. When EPA sets those blending levels, it is not so much for soybean oil, so much for canola oil, so much for waste fats. They set a number, and then the market gets to figure out how much good they use of each to fill it. Now, EPA makes assumptions on what they expect, but those are just their assumptions only. So we are going to need potentially a lot of soybean oil here if EPA's proposal is finalized as it's currently written. And so I think we'll be able to use as much as we can get our hands on. I think the limit will be the amount that we can crush here domestically. That's always the limit. If you can't process it to separate the meal and the oil, then you have to send it somewhere that can. So I'm optimistic that we can really utilize the capacity of those crush plants.
Now, is not crush going up? Are we not building new plants?
We have been building new plants like crazy the past few years. Whenever the renewable diesel boom hit, which is a newer, it's not biodiesel, but it's something that's hit the market a little bit newer. It's kind of like biodiesel, made from soybean oil and other things, and it goes in diesel engines. But when that hit in earnest in 2023, we started seeing a lot of announcements for new soybean crush plants. At one point, we had over 20 announcements that would increase the domestic capacity by over 30%. Now, some of those announcements have pulled back, but we've still seen significant expansion. And not all of it is finished yet. So we still have more coming online this year, next year, and the year after. And if we get good blending numbers from EPA, there's the potential we could see even more new announcements.
Now, as we demand more soybean oil for fuel and we grow more soybeans, we're going to be increasing our meal production too. Is there any future crystal ball that shows meal demand increasing for any reason?
I think meal demand increases steadily and slowly over the long run. Meal demand is really protein demand. I mean, that's what it's used for. It's a high protein animal feed. And so as populations grow, as incomes grow, people want more protein. And so that is really the increase in meal demand. Now those growth, like in population and income, is generally pretty slow. And in some of the markets like China, which has been our largest soybean market, right, their population has peaked. But there's lots of places like in Africa, for instance, where their populations are still growing and will grow for quite a while. They have a fairly low income base, so there's a lot of growth potential there. So yeah, I think we will see long-term soybean meal growth. Right now, our domestic capacity is growing faster than the demand for soybean meal domestically. But that's why we trade, right? We send it to areas that can utilize that.
And we want to continue with that conversation, the topics in that conversation, some dynamics in soybeans, and we're going to do that right after this. We are back with a visit with a number of ag economists and agriculture executives about dynamics in the farm economy. Our next guest is Billy Burns. Billy is with StoneX, formerly FC Stone, and he takes care of a lot of the issues regarding soybeans and corn, and we've talked to him quite a bit about soybeans and the dynamics and the uncertainty in the soybean market.
There's a lot of moving parts right now. But at its core, to start from a building block perspective is, as you know, is 20% of a bean is going to get you oil. And we are carrying a 52% oil share right now, meaning 52% of the bean's value is coming from 20%, which is an extraordinary number. In my career, I've seen it as low as 18%. But, we always kind of hung out in that 25 to 30% area because it's a byproduct. Soybean oil is a byproduct, but now it's the
main
goal.
main co-product.
Yeah, when you breach a 50% marker on 20%, that's quite a bit.
That's right. Now, that's all because of biofuels, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely, without question. And so, we've spent as an industry, $9 billion into additional crush assets, which will keep beans home to then fuel what we feel like is a very positive outcome on the proposed RVO, albeit without not knowing about SREs yet. So we're very intrigued to see how the finalization of this process ends up. So
What would you like to see that end up for the benefit of the farmer? How should it end up?
For the U.S. farmer, without question, if they just kept it status quo. If I'm a U.S. farmer, I don't know if I could have written the regulatory side of the compliance for the RVO any better. It protects the U.S. farmer first. So you can't, if it just stays steady and there are no changes, it's going to be a very exciting time for the U.S. farmer.
Now, it seems like we've got, when you look at the demand, the current demand for soybean oil and the potential future demand for soybean oil, we don't have enough. And what's that going to mean for soybeans? Are we not going to have enough? And does that mean a higher price for soybeans in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very, very constructive. As a firm, we're prohibited from putting out price targets, but as I said on the panel, is that rising tide lifts all ships, and there may be a bumpy ride here as we end the year and as we get going and the policies take hold and we start to see a heavier flow of merchant trading. But at the end of the day, to your point, we've got to plant more than 83.5 million acres. I mean, I know, and we have to incent the producer to do so, right?
Well, that's right.
And
they're looking about what they do next year.
Even though it may, I mean, I know if you like to grow corn, you like to grow corn, but I think that once we've kind of cleaned up all these moving parts, that's the biggest thing. There's so many significant factors that we're going to be in probably a range-bound market for soybeans for the interim. And I'd struggle to find a producer out there that is saying that they're having a bad crop this year. It's going to be should be a monster. I mean, even the marginalized acres would have been, their yields this year in all likelihood are going to be, record-breaking yields 10 years ago. As far as prime Central Illinois type farmland, marginalized acres in, for instance, Mississippi they're gonna be 60 plus in places, right? And that's not the world that I grew up in with soybeans.
So a little bit of interesting decisions that farmers will have to make next year. Do you grow more soybeans because of more demand for soybean oil? We want to shift gears a little bit here and talk with Devin Mogler, who is president and CEO of the National Oilseed Processors. He has been getting into several different issues, one of those with the MAHA movement. And I asked Devin about really what's going on with Secretary Kennedy and the MAHA movement.
It's a bit of a head scratcher because these are the same oils that we've been producing this way for decades and decades. They're heart healthy, they're high in unsaturated fats, they're made by American farmers, and they happen to be affordable. So it feels like we've got everything on our side, including the science, but there's some folks out there in the health influencer community who have decided they want to pick a fight with seed oils.
Now, I'm sure farmers are going to be very happy with you. So let's talk about soybeans first. Soybean processing is really going guns. There's a tremendous amount of new construction and crushing plants. Soybean oil has the greatest demand it's had for a long time. So that's got to be pretty good for the soybean economy.
I think it is, yes. I mean, NOPA members have invested over $6 billion to expand production capacity by over 25% since 2023 levels. And a lot of that was done to meet growing renewable diesel and biodiesel demand. But we also got food demand as well. About half of the oil that we produce goes into the food supply and about half goes into biofuel. So they're equally important markets. And as you mentioned, it's an increasingly valuable part of the soybean. It might only be 20% of the soybean, but it's over half of the value today. So if you think about a $10 bushel of soybeans, $5 of that is from the oil, half of which goes into food and half of which goes into biofuels.
And we're certainly seeing greater opportunities for soybean oil demand with biofuels, and that's going to mean probably higher value of oil. Is that going to mean a better price for soybeans and more acreage for soybeans?
I don't want to predict the acreage. We process just over half of all the soybeans we grow today. Typically, we export the other half as whole soybeans. However, with the different trade spats, particularly with China, which takes about half of those exports, we could see more of those being processed here. But yes, ultimately, adding more value to them here will add more value at the farm gate.
Okay. How about corn? We've got a tremendous corn crop coming on here. The value is going down little by little because of the increased opportunities, but we've got to make some money somewhere.
Yes, we do. I mean, I'm not on the corn side of things anymore, but I mean, I recognize that a lot of the value driven there is through ethanol demand. That's still a growing industry, but still fighting to find its way to higher blends. We've kind of been stuck at 10% blend rate for too long. Need to get the E15 stuff done and need to get this RVO rule finalized, which locks in 15 billion gallons for ethanol. But importantly, on the biodiesel side, is setting a really aggressive target of an implied 5.61 billion gallons, which we think we can meet for 2026.
Now, is corn oil part of the formula for biofuels?
It is, yeah. Distiller's corn oil that comes off of a dry mill is one of the preferred feedstocks for producing renewable diesel and biodiesel. However, it's not available nearly as high a quantities as soybean oil.
Okay, all right. What do we see as far as Washington, as far as what you would like to see and your colleagues lobbying for in Washington that would help the farmer? What do you, where do we need to go with policies that would help farmers?
Well, I'll start by saying this Congress and this administration has been very helpful to farmers so far. With their proposed RVO rule, it's an unprecedented level and something that is directly meant to benefit farmers. So getting that finalized would be a huge deal. They're aiming to have it finalized by October. So we're working hard on that. We got some big wins in the One Big Beautiful Bill, as it was called, that was signed into law on July 4th. That improved the 45Z clean fuel production credit, which is the biofuel tax credit that goes not only to biodiesel and renewable diesel, but also was expanded to ethanol and sustainable aviation fuel when it was created a few years ago. We got some important changes made in there. We had a lot of champions from farm country on Capitol Hill that went to bat for the soybean and the soybean processing industry to eliminate the indirect land use change penalty that our farmers are facing, and also include a ring fence of North American only feedstocks can qualify, because we've seen such an influx of imported quote unquote used cooking oil as well as tallow from other countries displacing our soybean oil for producing biodiesel and renewable diesel. What this tax policy does, coupled with the RVO, if they finalize it as it is, it puts soybean oil at the front of the line as the preferred feedstock.
Okay. Do you see at all Congress accepting any of Secretary Kennedy's dismissal of oil seeds as far as getting into the food supply particularly, or having an impact on health?
I think they're going to push back pretty aggressively if they start to make any policy recommendations that would impact agriculture. They hinted at it in their first report with calling out pesticides and calling out some of these safe and affordable food ingredients that our farmers produce. So I think as the MAHA Commission continues down this path of putting out policy recommendations early next month, I think you're going to see Congress pushing back pretty strongly.
I know corn growers and soybean certainly pushed back after that first report. Did NOPA, were you part of the dozens of farm organizations that did as well?
We did, yes. We were having meetings with the administration and with Capitol Hill before the report came out, but we had a hard time getting in the room with the folks who were writing it. And after they put out that report, they started calling in farm groups to come in and share our perspective, which was great that they're finally including us in the process. It's been a very open door administration. I think they do truly have farmers' best interests at heart. We just have to make sure we get them educated with the right science and the latest data on everything that we're doing.
And what is that? We appreciate the visit with Devin Mogler, who's CEO of the National Oilseed Processors. We'll be back right after this. Before we wrap up our program, we want to talk about an issue that's been a real headache for a lot of farmers, not necessarily in the Corn Belt, but some could stretch into here, and that's the issue of labor. And we visit with Tanner Emke, who's chief economist of CoBank, and that's one of his issues that he's been watching is availability of labor vis-a-vis immigration. Labor and immigration has become suddenly an issue that farmers really never worried about for a lot of years.
Some farmers. For a long time, a lot of farmers could always rely on some level of automation, getting auto steer in the tractor, things like that.
Right.
But really, I mean, if you go back decades, labor's always been an issue in agriculture.
Well,
trying to find.
Well, I was a farm kid, and
Yeah.
I was labor, and my dad was labor too.
Yeah.
But the issues that are now a national issue,
Yes.
an international issue.
Becoming it's more than ever. Labor has always been an issue in agriculture, but now with some of the immigration things that we have going on, the crossings at the border are down, deportations are up. And so what that means then, we're going to have a tighter labor supply, legal or illegal, however you want to define it. When you have fewer people out there that are willing and able to do that kind of work, that's going to make it more complicated for businesses, especially farms, to find the right people who are willing and able to do that kind of work. There's an argument that we're going to just replace those workers with American workers. You've been in agriculture your whole life. I've been in my entire life. And when people leave the industry, they typically don't come back. And when a young farm kid goes to college, who's going to replace that farm kid in the tractor seat? So it becomes an issue of immigration now, or more automation. And I think in the future, it's going to be absolutely more pressure for farmers to innovate around those issues, whether it's innovating new technologies or implementing new technologies on the farm, or using the visa programs, H-2A specifically for agriculture, for seasonal labor. But even in agribusiness, it's an issue for a lot of our customers from CoBank that are in agribusiness. They may not be able to use H-2A since they're running maybe, say, a crush plant or an ethanol plant all year long. That's not seasonal.
No.
So what program do you use? A lot of them are going to H-2B. So it's going to be an amalgamation, if you will, to use a big word out there, for using the VISO programs and trying to find the right technologies to replace manual labor. And none of those are really cheap.
And the suggestion of putting people on Medicaid and taking them out to the field, I don't see that being a workable plan.
It's a nice idea. I don't see how it's going to work anyway, since there's a lot of people out there that could work, able-bodied people. But look at the workforce participation numbers, Stu, longer term. We're seeing more and more people dropping out of the workforce. And it's not because for lack of jobs, it's because they don't want these kind of jobs. They don't want to go slaughter cattle. They don't want to work out in the heat picking vegetables. They don't want to sit in a tractor for a career. They might be able to, but they don't want to. It's a lifestyle choice for a lot of Americans. And so when more Americans just don't want to do this kind of work, where are you going to find them? You're going to have to go to the immigration visas or the work visas for immigrant labor, or again, try to find more automation to extend the productivity of the workers you do have.
How much of a challenge will it be for Congress to address the issue?
How much of a challenge?
It's not going to.
Can anything really get done? Forget about immigration. Can anything be done really in Washington these days? I'm not a Washington insider by any means, but you and I read the same headlines, Stu. It's hard to get anything done in Washington, D.C.
And so, as you can see, there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty in agriculture today. We appreciate the opportunity to visit with all those individuals. We hope that they have provided some information to you about all of the uncertainty in agriculture, which is really the only certainty at this point. I'm Stu Ellis. Thank you for watching today right here on an extended version of From the Farm.